Keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling and flare. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch the scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat, beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio Show. Once again with your host Nick Bernabe here on ucy.tv and the antimedia.org/radio. Oh man, really big holiday today for me, especially. I mean, you know, a lot of these holidays have just become such bullshit, you know. I mean, 4th of July and, you know, Christmas and Thanksgiving. Don't get me wrong, as we've talked about before, it's, you know, a great time to get together with family and stuff. But Martin Luther King Day is one of those days that, at least in, you know, more recent times, stands for something good, right? And it's kind of a day to remember and celebrate the life and death of Martin Luther King Jr., who was probably one of the most successful activists in, you know, U.S. history, basically. And, you know, this is a man who accomplished a lot of things throughout his life, and, you know, it's just made this country and this world a better place. And, you know, because of that, it's awesome that we're, you know, celebrating that today. Now, unlike people who work for the government, you know, I worked today, you know, and I didn't take the day off to celebrate Martin Luther King. I worked to honor Martin Luther King, you know, and I guess that's something personal that I felt like doing. But here's the thing that really gets me, and I was thinking about this earlier today. Isn't it kind of ironic that the government gets the day off? People that work for the government get the day off on Martin Luther King Day, when, by, you know, many estimations, by many accounts, and what I guess most people probably already believe is the government, either directly or indirectly, was responsible for getting rid of Martin Luther King. And so I do find it really ironic that the federal government has created a holiday out of the, you know, his life, considering the fact that they, you know, back when he was still around, he was enemy number one. I mean, he was branded as a communist. He was branded as a radical. Many people thought he was a terrorist. You know, if Martin Luther King was around today, they'd be saying that he works for the Kremlin. That's what they'd be saying about him, you know. And so it is very interesting to see how the government can, you know, later on can go around and be like, oh yeah, we love Martin Luther King, and, you know, he stood for something great. It's like, wait, when he was alive, you guys killed him. You guys, you know, assassinated his character. I mean, there's We posted on the anti-media. We covered it last year or a year or two ago, but we reposted it today on our Facebook page about how the FBI was trying to get him to commit suicide. The FBI was trying to get Martin Luther King Jr. to commit suicide. And now the federal government walks around acting like they're celebrating what he's done. They're still committing the same exact shit that Martin Luther King was speaking out about. Whether we're talking about institutionalized racism, whether we're talking about the violent empire that the U.S. is at the forefront of, and inequality and all that stuff, it just came out today that 8 men, many of which were American, own more wealth than half of the rest of the entire world. 8 people. 8.
And that's just what they're letting us know, Nick.
Yeah, and that's only the stuff that's on the books. So all of the stuff that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke out about, don't get me wrong, he made some great positive progress. But the issue is still there. The issues are still there, and the government's going around celebrating like, oh, yeah, we did our job, guys. We fixed it. Everything Martin Luther King wanted, we fixed it. No, you haven't. The empire is worse now than it's been. It's bigger. It's worse. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us. And that's why I was working today, and I didn't take the day off like whoever these assholes are that were marching here in San Diego in our what do you call it? It wasn't a march. It was like a parade. The damn parade is made up of like cops and like federal employees and stuff. It's like, why are you guys marching in the Martin Luther King parade? You guys killed the guy. You know what I mean? And so just to me, it's hypocritical, really hypocritical the way that it goes on. And you know what? A lot of the activists here locally in San Diego, they refuse to take part in the official Martin Luther King parade. But there's like a separate one where the activists organize, and they had their own march, and that was a march that was headed up by the black community and the people that are fighting for rights here in San Diego, not by federal. I shit you not. There's FBI people marching in the Martin Luther King parade in San Diego. I'm not even playing. So it's something that it's so strange. I mean, this holiday has great meaning, and it's something that is actually worth celebrating. Yet it's been co-opted at the same time by these assholes that run the government that are actually responsible for Martin Luther King's death. And that's what just pisses me off about it, dude. It's just
Nick, you know what makes me mad the most, because I know you have a ton of friends that are African American. So do I, right? And nobody's ever taught our real history. And, every Martin Luther King Day I have to bring up, why was he killed? People go, oh, he was fighting for civil rights. Yeah, sure he was. He wanted to bring about the Poor People's March. That was civil rights for all people who are poor, because he knew in 1968 that money, green, the color green was the only the color that mattered to the people in charge. And that if we never actually came together and pushed our weight as the working men and women, what were we ever going to get out of this government except them sending us off to war to get rid of us? They don't want us here. They hate us. So you have to think about a guy like MLK. He was going to bring us all together. They've shit on his name. They've shit on his history and what he was actually going to do, not for the country, but the whole world, dude.
Yeah, and he was a huge peace activist too, anti-war activist, one of the biggest, most effective critics of the Vietnam War. And those are the two things that are sacred to the superstate, right? If you want to go and you want to fight for racial rights and stuff like that, they'll let you have a little bit of sway, and they'll give you a little media attention. I mean, they do that, but then they try to spin it in a way that's just divisive. It's like, oh, there's this radical Martin Luther King, and he's going to bring about some type of black revolution, and white people, you need to be scared. And so, like, that's what they did originally, and that's how they tried to package Martin Luther King. They're like, okay, we'll let him have his little platform, we'll let him have his march, but let's package this as a race war and let them, let's package it as something that can divide people, divide and conquer.
And don't forget summer.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, don't forget what they did too, which was the spillover of the summer of '69, where they quite literally used Aldous Huxley's Brave New World scenario and just got everyone high and got them, into Woodstock, just totally distracted the entire youth movement and really just crushed both of those dual movements together. This is why people are angry about the baby boomer generation. They were ultimate consumers in the 80s, but they had the window in the 60s and 70s to change things, and they just got high and did drugs and had sex.
Oh, man. Let me bring Jake in. Jake, what's up, dude? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Yeah, you're right. While this day has a lot of meaning, it's definitely been co-opted, and it's also important to remember that Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the targets of COINTELPRO, which was back in the 60s. It was a series of kind of secret, illegal FBI projects that were, their purpose was to infiltrate domestic political organizations and try and smear and discredit them. And as a Vietnam War critic, as a civil rights leader, he was a double whammy of a target. And as a symbol of, racial equality, there's the triple whammy. And so, this COINTELPRO conspiracy, this involved psychological warfare and just all kinds of wrongful imprisonment and all kinds of stuff that was going on. So he was a target from them from day one. And, that's what our government does to powerful symbols who try and get in the way of the war machine. And DB's right, and both of you guys are right. And obviously he was a powerful advocate for race relations, but he was even more than that. He was an advocate for economic equality and bringing an end to, or at least not bringing an end to, but calling attention to the military-industrial complex. So he was a global icon, and that's when, I think that's probably when they decided to take him down, is when he was going to, call for that economic equality. And his movement against the Vietnam War as well. He's just that he was an incredible person, and not just for race relations, but for that too. And that's worth cherishing as much as people are today.
Yeah, he was just the total package. And so a couple more points I want to make on Martin Luther King before we go on. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, the struggles continue. As we all know, the Black Lives Matter movement and other people out there fighting for racial justice continues, hasn't stopped. I mean, from the 60s up until now, sure, segregation is gone, official segregation, although it still exists unofficially. Segregation is gone, but there's a lot of progress that still needs to be made for, racial equity and the wealth gap and just racism, man. Racism is rampant as hell. It's crazy rampant. I'm not going to sit here and say Donald Trump was elected solely because of racist people, but there is a vein of racist people within the Trump movement, dude. And it's coming out into the open. Maybe that's actually a good thing because now we know who these people are, but racism exists in the United States, and it's going to persist. And I think it is kind of tied back in with economics and stuff. And, another thing that Martin Luther King felt really strongly about was that war leads to inequality. And that's something that I feel very strongly about as well, because, when you start these huge wars around the world, back then it was Vietnam. Let's just say right now we're talking about Afghanistan. It really does drive inequality, because what you're doing is you're taking money from all the regular working people that work jobs, that pay taxes. You're taking money from them and you're funneling it through the military-industrial complex, which is made up of a bunch of huge, extremely powerful, influential companies. And so basically what you're doing is you're sending all of the money upward through the military-industrial complex. They go around bombing countries and sending troops out, and having people die on both sides of the conflict. And so that's one of the things that drives inequality in the United States so much, is the fact that we have a huge empire and a huge military-industrial complex where we spend, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know how much money is spent on the military-industrial complex every year because there's so much shadiness going on. I mean, on the books, it's like, what, $600-800 billion a year or something like that. That's just what we know of. I mean, there's a bunch of black budget stuff that we don't even know about. I mean, for all we know, there's $1 trillion a year spent on military stuff. $1 trillion, it goes taken from us, and it goes straight to the top. And so, I think the issue here needs to be addressed together. And that's why Martin Luther King, I'm pretty sure that's why they decided, okay, that's enough. We got to take the guy out. And it may have been rogue elements within the military-industrial complex that took him out. Maybe the CIA or the FBI said, yeah, give the green light. And some military contractor just carried it out. Who knows? But and this is maybe where Bernie Sanders was ineffective, where, you can't really criticize just one side of the spectrum here. You can't say, oh, well, wealth inequality is a bad thing. And, well, we got to address it fully. And that's what Martin Luther King was doing. He was addressing the fact that having this giant empire around the world is creating a lot of the inequality in this country. And, maybe that's why today it came out from Oxfam that 8 dudes own as much as half of the rest of the world. Maybe it's because we got such a big empire and we spend so much damn money on military expenditures that these guys are able to capitalize on it. Sure, that's not the only reason, but that's a big part of it.
Let's not forget the Rothschilds Trust, too. If anybody wants to look that up, they're in the trillions. So individuals are not the be-all, end-all. There's so much numbers in computers now, nobody really knows what the GDP of the world is even.
Hard to track all this stuff, man, But I'll tell you what, these 8 dudes that own all this wealth, they've got names and they've got addresses, and I'll just, leave it at that. Now, the other thing here is, I think another reason why MLK was eventually taken down was because he was breaking down barriers. He was breaking down, as I said, when the civil rights movement was solely about racial justice, I'm not saying it wasn't a great movement, it was, but it could be easily hijacked and turned into divisiveness. This is the same exact tactic that is being used currently with Black Lives Matter. I mean, I just read a quote from a Trump supporter who was like angry about losing Affordable Care Act because they didn't know that Obamacare and Affordable Care Act was the same thing. The quote was saying, well, I thought Trump was just going to come in and arrest these Black Lives Matter terrorists and blah, 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 blah. So basically what's going on here is that it's just like with Black Lives Matter back in the day with the civil rights movement, they used the movement as a divisive thing where they tried to scare the hell out of white people, and they tried to demonize black people and make people think that there was going to be some kind of uprising and that, whites had to be scared and, all this kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is still going on right now. But Martin Luther King himself, behind all the propaganda and stuff, he was breaking down barriers. I mean, look at, especially in the later marches and stuff, there's all kinds of people from all different races and stuff. He was bringing people together on a massive scale, on a scale that hadn't been seen, and so that's why he became such a threat. He was bringing people together, and he was recognizing the true issues and the true enemies, which is like the military-industrial complex, the oligarchy, the foreign policy, the economic policies and stuff like that. I mean, we would have given him a little more time, I'm sure he would have started looking at the Federal Reserve. And so when someone becomes so effective that they're bringing people together from all walks of life, every different racial group, and it starts to develop into more of like a class struggle, that's when the government starts to get really like put into a bind, and they start having to do extreme measures. They tried to assassinate his character, that didn't work. They tried to get him to commit suicide, that didn't work. They tried to intimidate him, throw him in jail, beat him up, all that stuff didn't work. Well, then they exhausted all of their options, and then assassination was the only thing left, and that's what happened. And so, that's what it is. And we've got a huge, huge struggle. We need like 20 Martin Luther Kings right now, or like 100, or like 150,000 of them or something. We need people that are smart and that bring people together and that could lead not through ego or just through their own kind of self-gain, but to make the world a better place. And I think Martin Luther King was genuinely someone who was trying to do that. Now, of course, all human beings are not perfect, and I'm sure he had his own flaws and stuff, but he was doing the right thing. And like I said, if he was alive right now, think about it. Martin Luther King was branded as a communist. I've never seen anything that he's said publicly saying that he was a communist. I've never seen him say.
He was a democratic socialist, especially economy. I mean, people need to understand he wanted to give people the control back to actually make a decent living. That's not communism, morons.
Exactly, but what I'm saying here is that he was branded as a communist because back then what they were dealing with from a propaganda point of view was the Red Scare, the Cold War. It was Russia, the USSR is banging on our doorstep, knocking on our door, ready to knock down our, invade our country. And so what they tried to do was attach Martin Luther King to all of that propaganda that they'd been investing in for a long time during the Cold War. So they tried to attach Martin Luther King to the USSR and just say, oh, he's a communist, he's basically a terrorist. So, we just need to write him off. And, people,
So,
they throw him in jail, they beat him up. And the public, I think the general public at the time was probably cheering it on.
I was just going to say, people always kind of wonder who took him out and if it was a joint effort. They just need to look at Operation Gladio and understand why he represented a big red threat from the inside. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and so, here's the thing. We haven't really grown out of that Red Scare. I mean, I guess we did for a little while, but it's back. Everybody, 2016, 2017, it's back. The Red Scare is back. I don't. If you haven't noticed, you've been living under a rock somewhere because Russia is the boogeyman once again. And anybody that speaks out against U.S. foreign policy, anybody that criticizes our wars, anybody that criticizes our economic policy, anybody that criticizes our government is now a Russian operative, including the anti-media, including myself, DB, Jake. You guys, I know we haven't gotten our checks from the Russians yet, but believe me, we're all working for the Russians. That's the propaganda that is still going on right now. Because Martin Luther King was a Ruskie. We're Ruskies. Glenn Greenwald is a Ruskie.
Jeremy Corbyn's a Ruskie.
Corbyn, which is the guy that runs the Labour Party in Britain, is a Ruskie now, apparently, because he was saying, well, maybe we shouldn't start a war with Russia. Well, if you don't want a war with Russia, obviously you work for them. That's the propaganda we're dealing with right now. And I'll tell you what, the same actors are leading the way. Washington Post and the New York Times, they're the same ones that branded Martin Luther King a communist. They're the same ones branding anybody that doesn't want war with Russia right now as a sympathizer to Russia.
If you don't want nuclear war, which is inevitable because our conventional forces will overwhelm theirs because we spend 50 times as much on our military, if you don't want the coasts of the United States nuke, then yeah, we're Ruskies. I mean, that's the literal way the left is looking at it now, the insanity of it.
It's so crazy, and it's not just the left either. I mean, it's like what we're dealing with is the political establishment is trying as a whole, and I'm talking about the Republicans and the Democrats, like the establishment people are trying to create Cold War 2.0 with Russia. Like there's just, that's obvious at this point. Obvious. In fact, I've seen it through the Washington Post editorial board actually claiming that the Cold War 2.0 is something like a good thing, basically, is what they're saying. And so keep in mind that most Americans are not within the Democratic or the Republican establishment. Most of them aren't. I mean, John McCain is drooling at the chance to fight with Russia. I don't know if you've seen what this guy is doing. I mean, he's passing around this golden shower information to the CIA and to the FBI and stuff. I mean, clearly bogus reporting and a clearly bogus report that BuzzFeed posted as an unsubstantiated report. It didn't matter because the meme already takes effect. I mean, that's the thing. You can post something and say, hey, this probably isn't true, but here it is anyway. It doesn't matter. People don't read the part where it says, oh, this probably isn't true. The meme already stuck. It's already a huge joke. And believe me, I think it's hilarious, too, that Trump is into watching people piss on each other. You know, that's hilarious. It's almost as funny as the David Cameron having sex with pigs. I mean, very stuff.
Yeah. Sex tape just came out of Chuck Berry with someone farting in his face. I mean, are we gonna, you know, basically judge everyone for what they do behind closed doors? If we're at that point, your own cell phone will be used against you. How about that?
Seriously, though. Seriously. You know, but even this narrative that Trump is a stooge of the Russians is now being pushed around left and right. So I think they've I guess maybe because there's been so much propaganda invested in the Cold War and the Red Scare. Think of it. I mean, we're talking about like 70 years of propaganda, of anti-Russian propaganda. 70 years of it. What are they going to just let it all go out the window? And think of it, the baby boomers are the main block of voters at this point. They're all so conditioned by this anti-Russian propaganda that they'll believe anything about Russia. You know, and so the baby boomers are getting inundated now with this neo-Red Scare propaganda. And it's going to control the politics in the next election. It's going to. Now, it was too late this time around. You know, the Russian stuff, the DNC, Hillary Clinton campaign actually started it with the hacking and them saying that WikiLeaks, the info WikiLeaks got was from Russian hackers. None of that stuff still has not been proven. They've released several reports. The most recent one was supposed to be this bombshell, like, oh, here's our big time proof about the Russians. No proof at all that I saw. I looked through the whole thing, didn't see anything. All I saw was a big media critique about RT. All they did was talk about how bad RT is and how they helped Donald Trump get elected. And they were citing like shows that don't even exist anymore. Like,
you know what I love? You know what I love, Nick, was literally like hundreds of media outlets were criticizing lone RT. I mean, what does that tell you about narrative programming for us?
I mean, if one tiny news outlet like RT is able to overpower Washington Post, New York Times, CBS, NBC, and all these other guys, I must be living in the twilight zone because I know very, very few people that use RT as a news source that are not like activist-leaning people, which only make up a couple % of the entire population. Believe me, RT did not decide this election. Having Hillary Clinton as a candidate decided this election, you know, and I mean,
the Democratic National Convention decided Trump's presidency. I was there. I saw what happened. I'll never vote Democrat again, ever, no matter what. They'll have to change their name if they ever want to vote for me. I think probably half the people there are in the same boat. I mean, when you cut your party in half, it doesn't matter if Trump gets less votes. Trump gets more votes over the whole country. He gets the electorate. It's how it works, man. They split the party and they just killed that popular vote sway.
It's so ironic, too, because everyone thought, I don't know if you guys can remember back to during these primaries, it was widely considered that it was the Republican Party that was splitting apart. I mean, they were a laughingstock, and when Trump became the nominee, they were even more of a laughingstock. I mean, they were considered the ruined party. It was the end of the GOP. And then the Democrat, and that's just, shows you how badly the Democratic Party messed up, that they took that situation and screwed it up so badly that the GOP has ultimate control over 3 branches and most likely will through 2018. And the Democrats completely fractured their party. Why? Because of completely fraudulent activity. I mean, I don't know how we got started on this topic, but it's truly remarkable how horribly they screwed up when they had everything going for them in terms of the GOP self-destructing. That's what happens when you overrule the people. They did not want an establishment figure running for president.
And you know what? They cheated Bernie Sanders, and they did bad things, voter disenfranchisement, different things that they did, the Democrats. They had another easy out. They had an easy out. They could have just got Bernie Sanders as vice president. Even that would have been funny.
I know. It's unbelievable. And that was probably the biggest mistake that they made was that they're picking Kane for vice president. It shows how utterly, out to lunch they were on the pulse of the electorate, that they did not pick someone more progressive to run on the ticket.
It was almost like they thought dead people were going to be voting for him. Oh, man. Anyway, the reason we got on this topic was because the Democrats are the ones that started off this narrative that the Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. They're behind every blade of grass with their hackers and shit. Putin is personally hacking into the Democratic, National Convention. But ever since that little meme started taking root, and it just started kind of, I guess it didn't really take hold that strongly from Hillary Clinton, because no one really believes Hillary Clinton when she says stuff, and so when she's like, oh, well, it's the Russians, WikiLeaks is working with the Russians and stuff, no one really believed Hillary Clinton because she's not believable. But once the election was over, and then everybody is like, has this oh shit moment, like, holy shit, I can't believe this really happened. We got to figure out why. Well, you remember the first thing that they went after, the very first thing was fake news. Fake news caused Trump to win, and all these people, all these idiots that voted for Trump are just, the only reason they voted for Trump was because of fake news. And then remember, the big hit came out against us and against 200 other media outlets, where they said, you know what, these media outlets are spreading, not only are they spreading fake news, but they're spreading fake news that's being cooked up by Russian propaganda. And they're actually personally working with the Russians, or they're just too stupid to realize they're working with the Russians. That's what they came out, and that's what they said. And they said that about us.
Best thing they ever did, Nick, because it gave us unlimited firepower to reprogram people ourselves. If they want to make a fight with people that basically at this point in time don't have much to lose. I mean, we're not talking about CNN or a huge network they can crash. Were they going to crash individual pages? They're trying to do that. It's not working. It's pissing people off. It's making things spread even further. And it's making people want to leave the platforms like Facebook, like even this that we're talking on, Nick, and like Twitter. I mean, people are going to come up with things that are very cheap to pay for every month that don't track you with no ads. I'm willing to pay $5 for Skype a month. I'm willing to pay $5 for Twitter and Facebook that doesn't watch me. I think that's where the future is going. And it wouldn't have happened without these morons overplaying their hand.
Yeah, dude. And, it goes back to the fact that Cold War propaganda, it took a little break, I think. After 9/11, I'm too young to really know what kind of propaganda was going on before 9/11. But after 9/11, the Cold War propaganda took a break. And then it became, anti-Muslim propaganda is the new cool thing to talk about. And all these media outlets, without actually saying that they were dehumanizing Muslims or or turning Islam into a kind of a word that is synonymous with terrorism, without saying it directly, that's what they did. And after 9/11, the propaganda that came out was just to dehumanize Muslims, so that when we went over and started bombing countries in the war on terror, well, there were Muslims that were dying, and since they're basically just all terrorists, and since they're all basically subhuman, then Americans wouldn't give a shit that we're bombing, how many different countries. And the perfect the perfect example to show that this works is the Obama campaign. I mean, the Obama administration. How many countries has the guy? How many Muslim countries has he bombed? Like 8 or 10. You can't even keep track of them. Obama has bombed at least 8 Muslim majority countries, and first of all, people don't even know that it's been happening, and second of all, when they find out, most people don't even give a shit because the propaganda works. Most people in the United States, maybe not most. Let me take that back. Many people in the United States think Muslims are terrorists and that they're subhuman and that we might as well just drop a nuclear bomb on Iraq and turn the place to glass because they'd be better off. I mean, people think that kind of twisted shit because of all this propaganda. The reality of the situation is 99.999999% of Muslims are completely normal, peaceful people just like everybody else. And there's a small, tiny, tiny fraction of a percent of people, not only Muslims, but in every religion, every racial group, in every country that are going to be idiots and assholes and maybe extreme as hell and are going to kill people and do bad things. I mean, in the U.S., we've got the KKK and we've got plenty of other homegrown issues here in the U.S. And Muslims have their own issue with radical extremism, and every other country in the world has issues with radicalism. But you know, the propaganda is there and it works. And so now maybe people have grown tired of the war on terror. I don't know. But for whatever reason, they've gone back to the Red Scare. They've gone back to the Cold War 2.0 rhetoric. And that propaganda is so built in that it's so easy to reactivate. You can just flip a switch, just start talking bad about Russia, and everybody over the age of maybe 40 is just, a switch goes off in their brain. Like, oh, Russia bad. Yeah, Russia real bad. And then that's the propaganda works, guys. And, this Cold War 2.0 stuff needs to be taken really seriously because people are believing it. A lot of people are believing it. Now, a lot of people aren't. And a lot of people are questioning it. A lot of people want more and more answers and more questions. But we have to be careful not to get caught in our own echo chambers where we think nobody buys into this. No, a lot of people. I saw the most recent polling ever since after the from before the election to after the election. Now a majority of Americans believe that Russia is a threat to the United States. So it's the propaganda has been reactivated and it's working, and so we need to really be careful about that because the U.S. is now positioning troops all up and down Russia's border in Europe. We just found out today that they just moved Marines into what was it, Finland or Norway? Norway, actually, yeah. We just moved troops into Norway, which physically borders Russia in the very far north. We moved troops up into, I believe, Lithuania. We moved troops into Poland. I think we moved several thousand artillery pieces into Poland as well. I mean, we're building up right along Russia's border, and Russia is building up in reaction to that. They're building up as well. And so, what we're seeing is a remilitarization of Europe right now, and the U.S. taxpayer is footing the bill. You, me, Jake, DB, us three, and everyone else listening that lives in the United States, we are financing the remilitarization of Europe right now. It's happening as we speak. And it's like they're moving a bunch of pieces into place just before Trump takes office. I mean, all this stuff has happened. A lot of this stuff.
It's not for Russia.
The last month.
It's not for Russia, I can promise. I mean, people listening probably are already hip to that. This whole thing with Russia is just Obama's last whimpering debacle as he cries off into the night. So let's not pretend that we're going to go to war with Russia. We're moving troops to wipe out ISIS. So I hope people are ready for that. As soon as Mattis is in, there will be an official declaration, and we will go in hard and heavy, man. That was the goal all along. It was either fight Russia, or now we'll mop up the Middle East and China's next.
Crazy times, man. Crazy times. Definitely seems like the deep state, the CIA and the intelligence services and that kind of stuff. It seems like they're kind of pushing towards this, Red Scare stuff. Jake, I mean, what do you think of this, dude? Do you think they're serious about trying to provoke Russia? Are they just trying to make some money for their buddies that create these weapons? Or do you think,
Yeah, I
DB?
think it could be. I mean, I think they. I mean, here's my most optimistic interpretation of it is that they've seen the blowback from the never-ending wars in the Middle East and how it's, losing the faith of the electorate. Even someone as popular as Obama has lost a lot of his support because he's just been at war for 8 years. So one possibility is, perhaps by reigniting the Cold War, we can, in a new substrate of cyber attacks, which is a new domain that we're going to have to move into necessarily, actually. Perhaps we can, get some of that defense contractor money moving through a Cold War instead of just this messy, ground war in the Middle Eastern countries. But I mean, that's way too optimistic. Realistically, I think they're just very opportunistic and stupid, and desperate. And I don't know. Honestly, this entire show, I've been sitting here trying to figure out why the hell they're reigniting a Cold War with Russia, especially when the incoming president is cozy with them. Why are they trying? I just don't understand what the hell is going on. Why are they trying to make things, or maybe they're trying to sabotage Trump as he moves. Maybe they're setting up to where any cooperation between Trump and Putin necessarily looks like he's in cahoots with them because they've cast them as the enemy on his way in.
Well, you're right, I think, on that point, because here's the most recent hit, the most recent hit job that came out, which is, again, that that unsubstantiated report that came out of BuzzFeed, and that was later just regurgitated by everyone else. Is it painted Russia? It painted Trump as literally as like a puppet of Russia, because the whole report is based on the idea that Russia has a huge amount of information that they could blackmail Trump with, which includes the fact that he likes to watch hookers pee on each other, supposedly. So this whole report is basically saying, look, if Trump decides to work with Russia, well, they'll be able to paint it as, well, the only reason he's doing that is because they're blackmailing him, basically. And so what they're trying to do, I think, is neutralize any kind of peacemaking that Trump would try to accomplish with Russia, and basically be able to say, well, they'd be able to taint anything that Trump is trying to do with Russia by basically saying that the only reason he's doing any of this is because they're either working behind the scenes with him, or they helped get him elected, or that they have blackmail on him, or whatever. And so they're just trying to make it so that he can't do anything with Russia. Now, the report that I saw that came out today that got my attention about Trump and Russia was that Trump is actually going to supposedly meet with Putin right away, and that he's going to offer a deal to remove sanctions in exchange for both countries to reduce the amount of nuclear weapons. Now, doesn't that actually sound kind of like a good idea? I mean, and you guys know that I'm a huge critic of Trump, but that actually sounds like kind of a good idea. The two countries with the most nuclear arms, to start reducing them like drastically, and according to
But didn't Trump basically come out and say that he wants to expand the nuclear arsenal?
Exactly, and that's why it's so confusing to decipher what's really going on. But I read from today from several pretty decent reports from decent outlets that was in the books, that Trump was going to try to cut a deal with Russia to get rid of nukes, or to cut back nukes drastically. I don't know, because you're right. He has also said that they want to modernize and revitalize the nuclear arms and stuff like that. So who knows? This guy changes his position so often that we don't know what the hell's going on. What's clear, though, is that the kind of deep state actors are not changing their position. They've got a hardline anti-Russian position that is going to lead all the way right up until the inauguration date, and then we don't know what's going to happen after that.
Yeah, We're in for a roller coaster ride once this guy finally gets anointed. Man, I tell you, it's gonna be a crazy 4 years.
And then I read on Washington Post today that they were saying that Trump may have sabotaged the GOP's repeal of Obamacare because he was saying that everyone's going to have insurance and stuff. I mean, these guys are not on the same page, and it kind of goes back to this idea that although I think Trump is in the end, he's going to wind up being an establishment kind of, do your job, play your role type of character, just like Obama. He's not really part of the script at this point yet, and so he as we all see him on Twitter, he's not a scripted guy. So he's still disconnected from the deeper plans that are going on, the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, because he's not in there yet. I think once he gets in and he's going to get briefed and he's going to get inoculated with all this stuff that actually goes on behind the scenes that none of us are actually privy to, then you're going to see a big change in what you see out of Trump. And it's kind of like Obama, where he was this awesome, anti-war, progressive, human rights that's going to legalize weed and label GMOs and all this other stuff. And he gets in there and he's, oh, that's what's really going on. All right, guys, I'll give you gay marriage, and I'll halfway reduce one of our wars, and I'll start 5 more. That's pretty much all you're going to get out of me. And so we're going to see a big shift from Trump after Inauguration Day, or we're going to see something else that's going to be a lot worse.
Or we're going to see the conservative equivalent of JFK.
Yeah, that's what I was hinting at. I didn't know. So, you got choices, man. And I think, Obama had to make his choice, and he did. And Trump is soon going to have to make his. And I could pretty much guarantee that he's going to go the way of Obama. But, we're going to see.
The alternative is really, really what I don't think people truly grasp. If the United States military declares open war against the deep state, that can't be hidden. So that would unleash all of our hidden technology with us as the battlefield. So I think that's worst case scenario, and that's what I'm truly worried about.
Yeah, and that's one of the other possibilities here is that, there maybe there's a struggle going on and within the government, because keep in mind, the U.S. government, it's probably the biggest one in the world, right? I would think.
Biggest government, even bigger than China, man. How much does that smack us in the face when we look at our taxes?
And the funniest part is that China is communist, right? And our government's bigger than theirs, and we got one fifth of the population or something.
We have 1 million bureaucrats in Department of Defense. That's bigger than some army's actual army.
That's hilarious, man. But yeah, I mean, we've got a huge government, and I'm sure not all of them agree on stuff, and I'm sure there's a bunch of different separate groups of interests that operate within different parts of the government. And I think one thing that's normally kind of a given in most governments is that the military is slightly independent from the federal government. Normally, it's there's a separation there. And it kind of acts like a check and balance, especially in places like, for instance, like Turkey and countries that have experienced, revolutions and, turbulence recently. A lot of times the military will be separate, and, also which the case is also with Egypt. The military is separate so that if the government ever gets too stupid or too out of control, the military comes in, knocks out the government, has martial law for a couple months or maybe a couple years, and then they'll have a new constitution, have new elections, and then they start the process over again. That happens. This happened in Egypt 3 times in the past 5 years, and so it happens periodically. And I think DB, you could be right. Maybe there is maybe a branch of the military or a portion of the military brass that disagrees with the way that the U.S. is the direction of the United States. Maybe they disagree with the empire. Maybe they don't want us being the policemen of the world anymore. I know a lot of these military generals and stuff have spoken out pretty strongly against the empire, nation building, and putting our guys in harm's way when we don't really need to be. I mean, a lot of these guys have spoken out once they've retired and stuff. Maybe there is a movement within that is leaning in that direction. Now, just to kind of back this up with a little bit of evidence, looking back at the 2012 election in the primaries, the presidential primaries, which candidate got more donations from active duty military than all the other candidates combined? Ron Paul did. And what was different about him? Well, he was anti-empire. He was anti-interventionist. He was anti-war. So the guys in the military were actively supporting Ron Paul. Now, this time around, Gary Johnson was actually getting, at one time, was getting the highest amount of donations from the military, and then Trump was getting the next highest amount. And Gary Johnson was a libertarian candidate, and the libertarians are pretty open about them being anti-empire, anti-war. So that's pretty telling. There is definitely a group of people within the military that are against. They're not against the military. They're not against, being in the military or the United States having a military. I think they're against putting our military all over the world where they don't actually have to be. There's like no reason that we have our military in places like Japan and China. I mean, of course there's reasons for it, but they're not honest reasons. They're not telling us like, oh, well, we have our guys in Japan because, we have them there just in case we want to do something to China. They're like, oh, well, we just have them there because they want us there and stuff. And,
well, in our black ops, if you not just military campaigns, but the level of black ops, right? I saw this stat that we have black ops operations going on in like 70% of the nations of the world. We are, by any definition that you could conjure up, we are an empire, and yeah, it's almost inevitable that there's going to be factions of the military-industrial complex that are probably going to get tired of that because it's not sustainable. Any rational analysis of this can show you that it's not sustainable, and that we're showing the signs of collapse that all empires have shown in the past. Surely there's got to be some rational voices trying to talk us off this ledge.
Yeah, and the other thing about Trump is that he's got a bunch of former military brass in his cabinet and stuff. So, but he's also got Goldman Sachs and ExxonMobil in there, and so we don't know. We're gonna have to wait. We got 4 more days until Trump technically becomes the president, and then we're gonna start seeing how it's gonna unfold in the following weeks and months. Now, people out there with high hopes, maybe Trump supporters that are listening, don't get your hopes up too high because, a lot of things have already gone back on. I mean, Trump was going to get Mexico to pay for the wall. That's not going to happen. You're going to pay for the wall. And then Mexico is supposedly going to pay you back somehow. Obama isn't going to go through Trump doesn't look like he's going to go through with the clean repeal of Obamacare, which is what a lot of people wanted. The whole drain the swamp rhetoric, I don't see that really playing out, especially with the Goldman Sachs thing. And so expectations, if I was a Trump supporter, would be really low right now. Now, what I personally think is going to happen is just status quo, man. It's going to be a little bit of a tweak on what Obama's been doing, and that's about it. And then we're going to have another 4 years of that. So, not optimistic, but I'm not like, oh my God, it's apocalypse time. I'm not any of that stuff. I mean, we got to.
You know what, Nick?
Here's the issue. We got to keep working like Martin Luther King was working. We got to keep working like that, dude. And that's what we need to do. Here's the thing. And my philosophy on this has shifted over the years, but, I think it's less important to try to beg the government to tell us what to do, how we want them to tell us what to do, if that makes sense. But the thing I think is much more effective, and it goes back to this idea of agorism, is continuing to work and push forward on new ideas that can start making them more and more irrelevant, so that we don't need them to be telling us what to do because we're already handling it for ourselves. And that's the way we need to work. If we continue to work in this way of like, oh, well, if we could just get my president in power, he would do all the right things. It's like, no, he won't. That's the problem. Obama was supposed to be that guy. You know what I mean? Bush was supposed to be a non-interventionist. What happened to that? And now Trump's going to come in, drain the swamp, and fix the economy. Like, we got to stop putting our eggs in a basket of some guy that's supposedly going to fix everything. One guy is not going to fix everything. You know what I mean? The only guy that can fix what you're dealing with is yourself and the people directly around you. And that's the problem. Is like and I think they do this to keep us helpless. They do it to keep us thinking that we need them. They keep us doing it so that we don't empower ourselves, thinking that we need to vote for someone to empower us. And we need to push through with this philosophy of self-empowerment, not like voting for some guy and getting him to do our bidding. We got to do our own bidding, dude, from ourselves, from our families, from our communities, and that kind of thing. That's the way to push forward. If we continue to waste all of our resources, and the perfect example of this is with Bernie Sanders, man. I know a lot of people that physically went out there and worked and did all this stuff for Bernie Sanders only to see it, I don't want to say go up in flames, but kind of got flushed down the toilet in some ways. Now, don't get me wrong. There's still remnants of the Bernie movement that survived and stuff. And we saw it get activated last week. But, a lot of that effort and a lot of that work could have been put into something more effective that is not based on politics. So like you can do work that just one vote isn't going to flush it all down the toilet. It's kind of like the Affordable Care Act. I mean, all that political work that went into getting Obamacare done and passed and all this stuff, it could all get undone just by some politician getting elected. Do you really want to put your work into something that is that, volatile? Doesn't it make more sense for us to put in our work into something that it doesn't matter who gets elected, whatever we're building still exists and whatever we're building still works and it still helps people. You know what I mean? Like, we need to start thinking outside of the government paradigm, dude. That's the problem. Is like we keep on putting our eggs in the government's basket only to have those eggs disappear the next day and maybe one or two is left and it's, already cracked and it's already scrambled and we got to share it with somebody else. Like, that's not what we should be doing anymore. When we we put eggs in a basket, those eggs should be multiplying the next day, not getting worse. You know what I'm saying? And like, it's just, I don't know, dude. I think it's time for us to start taking a much better angle on activism and being constructive, man. Like 2017, we got to start doing agorism and this kind of stuff because that's how we build our way out. And then once communities get so strong and so self-sufficient, at what point we'll get to a point eventually where we're like, what do we even need these government bureaucrats for anyway? Like, we've already outgrown them. Why do we even need them anymore? We're already doing healthcare, we're doing social safety net, we're doing education and all of this stuff at the community level, and it's self-sufficient without the government's intervention. What do we even need them for now? To just start wars and to tax us? Like, no. Like, you know what I mean? Like, these ideas, of course, are still decades out, centuries maybe. But slowly but surely, this is the direction we need to work in to where we get down to so we can start to realize this idea of like self-government, and total, personal autonomy and stuff like that. Because otherwise, we continue to leave it in the hands of these bureaucrats. They're going to keep selling us out. Whether it's with war or whether it's with bailouts or whether it's with inflation and all these different issues that are inherent with government, they're going to keep happening with government. We start taking the things out that we need, regardless of the government, the stuff that we need to get done, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in office, all of that stuff should be taken out of the hands of government and run through like community or through like personal levels or through, cooperations and things like that. There's no reason why we don't have a health cooperative in the United States that doesn't have to be run by, Obamacare and that kind of stuff. I mean, these are the ideas that are going to empower us and free us up and give us the liberty to do things that, would be unthought of right now. In a couple of decades down the line, there's a lot of things that'll be more possible when we're not reliant on outside forces. So anyway, sorry for the long rant. Thank you all for tuning in. We're going to be back Wednesday. We're going to be talking about some stuff that's going on in Mexico. We're going to be talking about some pipeline protests going on all over the country that nobody's talking about yet. So come back to us Wednesday. We'll be back, Anti-Media Radio, 5 days a week. Peace out.
I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.